My name is Yulia Kuchumova, and I'm an assistant professor here at High School of Economics. Before that, I did my PhD at University of Michigan, and my field of specialization was public economics, and more specifically tax evasion. So I'm glad to teach you now this course, Public Economics. It's my main field of interest. But what I have to say from the very beginning, today we have a lot of material and just one lecture. So I have to go quickly through the instructions and then move forward to the material itself. So please, if there are any issues, if you cannot hear me, or if there are problems in viewing me or something like that, so let me know. Okay, so with that, I'm now going to share the documents. Let me to do that. Okay, hope you all can see this document, which is the basic syllabus for our course, which means like the main requirements, the main instructions for you. So I would go directly to some key details I want to emphasize. So first of all, I want to emphasize the prerequisites for the course. So we will rely in this course on some technical tools from mathematics of economics. So we will use Lagrangian. So when we will solve optimization problems, so we will use some notions from the game theory, like Nash equilibrium, equilibrium mixed strategy, and like this. So please check yourself whether you are familiar with this, and so decide whether you are prepared enough to take that course. Okay. We live in a time when we cannot meet in real life, and we are meeting just online. So therefore, I have some distance learning guidelines. You already received an email yesterday with those instructions, so I will just repeat. So we will meet in MS Teams, and all the instructions for the course will be in our system LMS. Right, so you probably already saw that I uploaded the lecture slides. You will also have there the seminar, the problems for the seminars, also the homework assignments will be there. The first one will appear today, and in this course, so I'm moving already to kind of talking about course requirement. So we will have homework assignments every week, right? And so you will submit them through the LMS again. So as a project. So what I will ask from you is that you write the homework assignment by hand, but then make a photo or scan or something like that, and just upload it to the assigned homework project. So then we will have a midterm exam. So this will be at the middle of the course and will cover the half of the course. So I'm sorry. And I didn't mention that the homework assignment would weight 20%, then midterm will weight 35%, and there will be a final exam in the course which is 45%. With regard to midterm exam and final exam, I will send an additional announcement about the date and about the kind of instructions. So it will be likely in Smart LMS, but this is not for certain yet. And the more detailed information is here. The syllabus is also available at LMS, so you can read it more carefully. Okay, what else? Textbook, right? So the main resource for study is my slides, which I make available, but they are based on the textbook, which is Hinrichs and Miles, Intermediate Public Economics. They are available electronically. I have a link here through the HSE library, but also there are some pre-published version of 2002 that available free on internet. So they are pretty much sufficient for us. Okay, so there are other kind of textbooks that are very interesting, like Gruber Public Policy and Public Finance and Public Policy. It's very recommended, but it's kind of not very kind of required for this course. Okay, so if you have any questions about the kind of the administrative part of our course, so please feel free to ask me either now or at the end of the lecture. You always can write me an email if you have a question. So please do that. So with that, if there are no questions now, I will move directly to the course materials. So I will start from an intro to make you familiar with what we are going to study. So why is this important? So let me switch now. Okay, guys. So what is what public economics is? Right? It's a course, right? It's a study that explores what is the role of the government in the economy. And nowadays, government is crucial or instrumental in most aspects of economic life. So government is in charge of huge regulatory structure, right? So the laws that it publish, all the regulations and stuff like that. Then the government also is in charge of collecting taxes. And taxes this is the money, the finance that the government then can use for different expenditure programs. That includes traditional public goods like infrastructure, public order, safety, defense, and also various welfare programs like education, retirement, healthcare, and different income support programs. Also, the government is in charge of macroeconomic stabilization. So in this course, right, we will mostly focus on this bullet number 2 and 3. The role of the government as a tax collector and the role of the government as provider of different programs. So, the role of the government increases over the last 100 and actually more than that years. So to support that claim, I have here a graph that illustrates that shows the tax revenue as a percent of national income. And this is for several countries, and you see that it's rose quite significantly, starting from 10% in 1870 to the 30-50% in 2010. And the tax revenue as a percent of GDP reflects the kind of the size of the government, the role of the government in the economy, right? Because this is the money they collect, and also this is the money that then they spend. So when we study the role of the government, right? So we usually answer two types of the question. So one class of the question are called positive questions. They are, how do government policies affect the economy? For example, do higher taxes reduce labor supply? So this is about an effect on a policy on the economy. But there are also another type of question that are called normative questions. And there we ask, how should policies be designed to be optimal, to maximize welfare, right? So once we understand how government policy affect something, right, some aspect of our economy or economic life, right, then we try to move forward and understand how those policies should be designed. And in this course, we would actually put more attention to the second type of a question, right? So the first type of a question, it's like more an empirical work, right? So there was actually a lot of that done. But then in order to understand kind of from the theoretical perspective, how should it work, what is important, what are key factors, right? So we need to start to think from the normative perspective. But probably you already started to kind of think, question yourself, why does government need to intervene, right? So we say that there is the role of the government, but from the very beginning, right? So we need to understand, why does government need to intervene in the economy, right? And there are actually, the economists provide two key reasons for that. And the first reasons arise from the failure of the first welfare theorem. It is that government intervention can help if there are market or individual failures. Right, we will talk about that more. And the second reason is fallacy of the second welfare theory. This means that the distortion of government intervention is required to reduce economic inequality. Right? So then we have inequality in real life, and the government policy can help us to decrease that inequality. Let's start from considering this first role of the government. And first of all, we need to recall what is the first welfare theory, right? This is from your microeconomic course. So let's kind of dig our brain and recall that theory. So it says that if there are no externalities, there is perfect competition, perfect information, agents are rational, then private market equilibrium is Pareto efficient, right? So we usually kind of remember this from the kind of microeconomic score that market is good, right? Market is efficient, right? This is true, but this is true under some assumptions, right? And these assumptions are important, especially in this course, because when those assumptions break, right, then the government intervention may be desirable. And specifically, the government intervention is desirable if there are externalities, right? So it's like pure externalities, or the case they exist in the public good story, right? Then the government intervention is desirable if imperfect competition exists, right? But this mostly studied in industrial organization course. Then the government intervention is desired if there is imperfect or asymmetric information. Again, this is an important issue, but usually this is part of public economics, but actually we would not touch this aspect in this course due to the limit of time. And also government intervention may be desirable if agents are not rational, right? And this is a growing field that there's a study in behavioral economics, which is a growing field. And so you see that there are a lot of reasons and a lot of field that arise from the failure of the first welfare theorem, including public economics. So then let us talk about the second role of the government. So even with no market failures, free market might generate substantial inequality. And inequality is actually a problem, right? Because we do care about our relative situation, right? No one likes to be poor, right? Especially if there are some extremely rich people, right? And how does this, what is the second welfare theorem and how does that relate? So let's us recall that theorem. So it is any Pareto efficient outcome, right? So now we start from Pareto efficient outcome, and it can be reached by a suitable redistribution of initial endowments and then letting markets work freely, right? So this is kind of an inverse theorem of the first welfare, right? In first welfare theorem told us that market is efficient, and the second welfare theorem, so if we start from an efficient, Pareto efficient outcome, then it can be reached by market, equilibrium. But there is one step, preliminary step there, that there should be made some suitable redistribution of initial endowments. That can be achieved by some perfect instruments like lump sum taxes. But in real life, this is basically impossible, right? Because in real life, government use some distortionary instrument like real life taxes, real life transfers, and then what we really have is that in order to improve equity, we will have to lose some efficiency. But the key aspect is that the second welfare theorem is not really true in real life, because we don't have perfect instruments to achieve initial distribution. And therefore, market not always can lead then some correct efficient outcome cannot be reached by market, right? And this means then we might want government to intervene to move us to a different outcome that might be more reasonable from the equity perspective. So here is an interesting example, but I will skip it, so read it by yourself at home. So we see that even when the private market outcome is efficient, it may not have good distributional properties. And in practice, efficient market generally seem to deliver very large reward to a small set of people. And then government can redistribute incomes through taxes and transfer system to achieve a more equal distribution of wealth. Here is the graph to support that in practice inequality is indeed an issue. So here's a graph of Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient measure inequality. And here is the Gini coefficient for some quite long period of time, starting from actually before 40s, right, 1930s or something like that, and moving up to 2000. And you see that after the Second World War II, there was some decline in the inequality. This actually the graph for United States, not for Russia, but nevertheless, even in that country, right, we see that recently, starting from probably 1970, inequality continued to increase for all groups of people, groups of workers, right? Men and women here are the groups of interest. So to sum up, right? So the government has two roles to for intervention. So to improve efficiency when private market is inefficient, right? And the second, to improve redistribution of private market outcome is undesirable due to redistribution concern. So I have two kind of simple illustration of those statements. So the graph is basically the budget line for two people. And the first graph showed that there is like this red dot in the inside of the budget set, And this is kind of inefficient point, and the government can help us to move to the what we call Pareto frontier, or basically the budget line, right? And the second graph illustrates that we sum at the Pareto frontier, the budget line. This red dot is already on the budget line, but it's in such a position that one person have a higher consumption than the other, and so then the government can. The role of the government is to improve the redistribution to make the consumption more equal. However, here I have to make some remark so that the government cannot really improve redistribution without losses, right? So because the government has, we already mentioned that, imperfect instrument. And here we are at the slide where we logically come to a question: should the government intervention be limited somehow, right? And the answer is certainly yes. We want the government to intervene, but to some reasonable extent. And why limit government intervention? There are several reasons. One is that there are informational problems. How does government aggregate preferences and technology to choose optimal production and allocation, right? So all this aggregation, like learning something, like collecting information and then aggregating that, is an issue, right? And it's costly. And then the government policies distort incentives, right? This is that the government has imperfect instruments like real-life taxes and transfer, and what means distort incentive means that people change their decisions if those instruments are used, right? So when taxes are used, people may take a different decision how much to buy, how much to work, or something like that, if there are taxes like consumption taxes, income taxes, and stuff like that. But just we here need to understand the general notion of distorting incentive, right? So policies affect people's decision. And what we have as a result, there is a trade-off, right, between benefits of government intervention. As I said, like the government can improve redistribution, but there are always costs of government intervention because of all that we mentioned. And here at the graph, right, it's kind of the same budget line, but the illustration here is that we start from this red dot that is represent some unequal outcome. When one person consumes more than the other, then the government can help to improve the redistribution, but at the cost. So we will lose on some efficiency, which here shown by that we will move not along the budget line, not along the Pareto frontier, but inside of the budget set. Right? Okay, so this is kind of the main reasons why do we have this course, right? Why do we study public economics, right? So the government role in the economy, its role for the intervention, and reasons for why should the government intervene, and why should we then limit this intervene to some extent. And here there are some background facts to illustrate what do we see in real world. How each country make its choice, right? So this is an illustration that kind of reflects the size of the government. So the figure measures the total government spendings as a percent of GDP in those countries. And it is for kind of Sweden, Canada, United States, and OECD average. And as you all might know, that the Sweden is one of the Nordic countries where the role of the government in the economy is quite high, right? And this is kind of what we see here in this graph, or in this graph. So the government spending as a percent of GDP is something about 50-60%, right? So quite a lot. And the United States in this graph is the country with the most size of the government in the economy, which is also kind of something that we probably do know from over general notions. So then here are some pie charts that help us to understand on what programs government spent their money. And here are the pie chart for 2 years, just to see some. Sorry, so there's a question, right? So by spending dramatically fell in 2000s. Kirill, if you can ask previous slide. Okay, so let me go back. Oh yes, this. I don't know for sure, right? So about the Sweden. So there are probably some 2000 year in all the countries there is some issues. Yes, something happened at the beginning of 2000. So is Afghanistan war was there? There's probably some something like a war that happened that affect that, right? So this is an interesting question that let us explore. So I don't know for sure right now. So then if we go back to this slide, we we see the governmental programs that on which governments spend their money. So you see the what is social security, right? Social security is basically pension. What we in Russia call pension fund, right? Then unemployment and disability program. Then education, welfare, housing program, health. So, right, health program like Medicare in the United States. So you see that over the time in the United States, the spending on health rose quite substantially. And also on education, welfare, housing also rose somewhat. But as regard to other programs, yes.
Doesn't the USA have private healthcare? So I thought that they shouldn't spend too much money on health, or
Yeah.
am I mistaken?
No, there is. It's not completely private, right? So the government do provide some health insurance, health insurance to some people. But if we compare Russia and United States, in United States the support of health is much lower, right? So in Russia, we basically all covered by the kind of this public health program, right? In United States, not every American is have a health insurance, right? So there are like older people, some who else? Some low-income people usually have there's some programs that help them, but usually health insurance is provided through your employer. But as you see from this very kind of basic pie chart, they do work on this issue, right? So compared to the previous years, they expand their health programs. So, okay, so let us move. And here are some pie charts to illustrate the sources of the revenue. Basically, what taxes do government collect? Again, this is about United States. So, as you can see right away, so the main source, the kind of key source of income is income tax. Then the payroll tax and corporate tax play a significant role, and the consumption tax does not really play much role for the United States. And as a comparison with other countries, I have here this figure that compare basically Mexico, Norway, and OECD average, and you remember those pie chart from the previous slide. So Mexico is one of the developing kind of country, or some country at the not transitional, but between those, then you see that the role of consumption taxes is quite significant there. So I'm pretty sure that in Russia the role of consumption taxes is also quite substantial. And here in your homework one, you will have a task to kind of construct your own pie chart for Russia, to kind of learn by yourself where we are in comparison with other countries. So there is a lot that can be said why there is so and like that, but just see there is a difference between the countries, and in this course we will talk probably not much, but just a little bit about those taxes. So okay, so the introduction is almost done, and so here's the plan for the lectures. I would not go into much of the details, but we have two parts of the course: public expenditures and public finance. Right, so we start from the public expenditure, and today we will talk about public goods, and then we will have midterm between those two parts. And so, okay, with that, I will move to the first topic, which is public goods. So let me switch my slides. Okay. Yes, so the question about the data is old. Because it's an illustration of some ideas, right? So if we would talk more about like the current situation and the kind of aspect like that, we will actually have to put more details on the current trends, but because this is a motivation, right? So for the course in general, right? So it's not really critical whether it's like really about very recent situation, or because the motivation is like this is true for the like global perspective. Okay, I'm moving on to okay, here we are. So, and we are going to talk about public goods. And first of all, we need to understand what are public goods. So let me give you some examples. What I have here is like national defense, radio broadcast. What are the features of those goods that are important that when we talked about public goods? It's actually that many consumers can benefit from such a good at one time. And this as opposed to the private goods, where only one individual can benefit from private good, right? So if you think about an apple, you have this apple, you eat this apple, nobody else can eat this apple. When you think about lecture, right? So lecture is a public good, right? Because there are many of you who are sitting now in front of your computers and can kind of consume this information, right? So, and it's that many of you can benefit from it, right? So, and more specifically, there are two properties of the pure public good that really characterize it. So the first one is called non-excludability, which means that no consumer can be excluded from a consumption. And the second property is non-rivalry, which means that consumption by one consumer does not reduce the quantity available for consumption by any other. So the first one, right? So non-excludability, right? So there is like if there is like open air radio broadcast, if it's there, everybody who is outside can consume it, can hear it, right? And there is like no actually, we cannot exclude people from that. And this almost true. Wait till the some future slides for me to explain that. And the second property, non-rivalry. So if one person listens to this open radio broadcast and the second person can listen exactly the same one, and the consumption of one person doesn't reduce the consumption of other, right? This kind of makes sense. And remember, this property very characterizes pure public good. Okay, yes.
So our election isn't exactly a public good because it doesn't correspond with the first criteria. So
yes, therefore
not everyone can participate.
Yes, you're right. But just wait the 2 more slides, right? And we will talk about that. Yes. So here's a graphical representation of the private good and public good, right? So we're all familiar with the budget line for the private good, and if we try to draw something similar for the public good, it would look like the figure P, right? Okay, so yes, you already kind of preview that in practice we have impure public goods, right? So and those properties I mentioned, they are for a pure public good, which is more like a theoretical concept. And most of the examples of the public good we have in practice, they are impure public goods. And what is the difference? So when there are two reasons why the public good could be impure. One is that there could be excludability at some cost, right? Here, like you already said, lectures, right? We can exclude people, right? Just like you are not part of the class, you are not enrolled into that course or enrolled into the university, so you're excluded, right? So the same story with cinemas, transmission of television signal, and there could be other examples. And the second reason for imperfection could be the existence of congestion. This is immediately clear when we think about roads. Roads actually is a public good, right? So if there is not too many cars at the road, your driving, right? Your consumption of like of the road, you're driving. So does not affect other people, and other people does not affect you. But if there are too many people at the same time on the road, right, too many cars, then we will have a congestion, we will have a traffic jam and stuff like that. And so here is an issue or like imperfection that make this public good imperfect. And approximately we can divide all the goods on four four categories. Private goods, which is rigorous and excludable, then common good, which is rigorous and non-excludable, then club goods, which is non-rigorous but excludable, and then pure public goods, which is non-rigorous and non-excludable. There are again hard to give some example of really pure public goods, and probably some example that can be provided here is like free-to-air television, air, national defense. Like there is like, again, we can be like a little bit suspicious about those examples, but to some extent they work. Okay, so hopefully you understand what is public good. But why do we study public good? What is the problem with public good? And you are all familiar with this problem. It's called free rider problem. What is the kind of story, the logic behind this problem? So because of non-excludability of a public good, a firm cannot charge can charge the initial purchaser, but cannot charge any of the subsequent consumer, right? And because of non-rivalry, the initial purchaser has no objection to other people's consumption of the good. Hence, there is a market failure, right? So the other story is that if the public good already there, it's really hard to force people to pay for that public good, right? Or like, yes, so financing public good is like really a problem because of like that logic, right? And so to really study that problem, we will now develop a model and explore the kind of properties of the optimal provision of public good and the market failure in details. So let us consider an economy with n individuals. We will index them by I, and there will be two goods, X and G. The production possibility in this economy would be described by a technological function f of X and G, f of X and G equal to 0. Then when we think about X, right, this will be the good that is always private. Some private good, an individual I consume quantity xi of that good. And we will denote by x without any indexes as sum of xi over all individuals, which is basically the total quantity of good x in the economy. We will consider two cases. First, we will think that good G is private. Right? And then we will consider a second cases, and we will presume that good G is public good. So in the first case, we will denote by GI consumption of good G by consumer I, right? Similar to good X. And G without any indexes will denote sum, the total quantity of good G in the economy, which is sum of GI over all individuals. And then utility of a consumer I depend on XI and GI. So it's his own consumption of XI and his own or her own consumption of good GI. When we will talk about case 2 where G is a public good, then, right, what is important that each consumer consumes G, right, the total amount of public good. and then utility of consumer I depend on xi and g, right? The index I after good G is critical, right? Because it means a lot, right? It's either means that we in case of private good or we in case of public good. So when utility, we always assume that utility is good, so it's increasing in each of the good, in consumption of good X and consumption of good G. And what we also will need is social welfare. So here we will assume that social welfare is equal to the weighted sum of utilities of all individuals in our economy, and weight on the a utility will be beta I.
Excuse me.
Right?
And
yes,
what is I? One more time.
it's index of a consumer. I represent individual I, right? So we have n individual. I equal to 1 is individual 1, I equal to 2 is individual 2, I equal to n is individual n, right? Clear?
Yeah. Thank you.
And then here is the our problem, right? So here is the first case. We will consider the situation where G is a private good, and what we want to understand is what is the Pareto efficient outcome in this economy, right? So what is the optimal amount of good X and good G, right? That actually what? That maximize social welfare subject to the production possibility constraint in this economy, right? And this is exactly what we are going to do here, right? So we maximize weighted sum of the utilities, which is social welfare, and subject to the production possibility constraint, right? So it's important here that we maximize with respect to xi and gi. Okay, and by solving this problem, we will identify the Pareto efficient outcomes in this economy. So how do we solve such a problem, right? How we derive the solution? We set up Lagrangian. So here, at this point, I presume that you all know what does it mean, right? So, which in this case, Lagrangian is the social welfare sum of beta IUI minus Lagrange multiply lambda multiply the constraint f, right? I omit the bracket and what is inside of the brackets for the shortness of notations. So we now need to take the first order conditions, right? So we maximize the Lagrangian, and we first take the first order condition with respect to xi, right? So once we do that, we will obtain the following condition, right, which is beta I multiplied. Here's a notation for the derivative of ui with respect to x.
Excuse me.
Right? Yeah.
And where does the sum go from Lagrangian?
Yes. So we maximize with respect to xi, and only one term in this sum depends on this xi. Think about if it would be x1. if it's x1, then only utility of the first consumer, u1, depend on x1.
Okay, now
Right?
I got it. Thank you.
And therefore, we have this beta I multiply the derivative of ui with respect to xi, right? So again, so I write as ux, which indication with that we differentiate with respect to good x, right? And this is equal to Lagrange multiply lambda multiply the derivative of f with respect to xi, right? But here you see there's no difference when we talked about f between xi and x. Again, so then when we need to take the first order condition with respect to gi. So it's equal to beta I multiply the derivative of ui with respect to gi equal to Lagrange multiply lambda the derivative of f with respect to the derivative of f with respect to gi. Right? Okay, good. So now let us take ratio of the first order conditions, and these yields are the equation 4, which is the ratio of the marginal utilities equal to the ratio of the derivative of f with respect to g divided by the derivative of f with respect to x. But now let's us recall what is it, right? The left-hand side of this equation, what is it? From your microeconomics course, you know that this is nothing else but marginal rate of substitution, right, of good g with respect to good x. Therefore, equation 4 can be rewrote as marginal rate of substitution for person I of good g with respect to good x is equal to marginal rate of transformation of good g with respect to good x. And once this condition is satisfied, we know that that allocation is a Pareto efficient allocation, right? So once we found, right, once we solved that and found an allocation, this is a Pareto efficient allocation. And the condition like that, right, the condition 5, marginal rate of substitution equal to marginal rate of transformation, describe a Pareto efficient allocation. Okay, now let us move to the second case. Now let us assume that good G is public good, pure public good. What is the difference?
Well,
we now, yeah, yes.
why there is a sum now? So
You're talking about equation 8?
yes, I'm confused with it.
Okay, so let us move to that thing. So now we again maximize the social welfare, right? Which is the same with only one difference, that now utility depends on the total, on the public good, right? Public good in the economy is only one. There's this, the amount of public good available in the economy, and every person consumes this amount of public good. If it's a lecture, you does not consume like first 10 minutes and then the second person consume, like you consume the whole lecture, right? Or if you go to the park, it's not that you consume one tree from the, like I'm kind of exaggerate, but like you consume the total amount of public good. And again, this we maximize social welfare subject to the reduction possibility constraint. Again, we set up Lagrangian and take the first order conditions. With respect to good x I, the condition is exactly the same. The difference arises when we take the derivative with respect to good g, right? And yes, we have now a sum over all I of beta I, the derivative of ui with respect to good g, where it comes from. So when we take the derivative of this social welfare function, so what is it? It's beta 1 of u1, and it's depend on x1 and g, plus beta 2 u2 that depend on x2 and g. G enters the utility of each consumer. Therefore, when we take the derivative with respect to g, we need to take the derivative of the utility of each consumer, right? And therefore, we have sum here. So we sum over all i's, over all consumers of beta I ui sub g, which is the derivative of ui with respect to g, equals to Lagrange multiplier lambda, the derivative of f with respect to g. Clear?
Yes. And in our previous example, every ui depend on a exact gi, so
Yes.
not on the same one.
Yeah, so it's you know, you need to imagine like that everyone, if it's private good, you have your own apple, you eat your apple, right? And nobody else eat the same apple, right? You just ate it, right? And when we talked about public good, it's a good that everybody consumes at the same time, right? All people consume one good, and everybody's consumption is the same. It's this total amount of this good, G in our case, right? It's like music. Everybody listens the same song, and everybody's consumption is this song, right?
Yes, okay, I understood it. Thank you.
Okay, good. So, but again, we now want to play with these first order conditions. So we will derive beta I from the first order condition. So it would be lambda f sub x divided by ui sub x, and plug into the second first order conditions. And as a result, we will get this equation 9. Which is sum, right? This is critical. Sum over all I of the derivative ui with respect to g divided by the derivative of ui with respect to x equal to the derivative of f with respect to g divided by the derivative of f with respect to x, right? So again, we know how we can rewrite this. It is sum of marginal rate of substitution, right, of good g with respect to good x equal to marginal rate of transformation. But this is now the condition for Pareto efficiency when we talked about public good, right? And the difference is exactly this sum. And this condition, condition 10, is called Samuelson rule. It's from long time ago, 1954, when Samuelson derived that, but it's still a very useful and important condition that we have to know. And the intuition behind it is simple. In the public good case, an additional unit of G increases the utility of all households, right? So if we produce one unit of good, of a public good, then it will benefit all the consumers, right? And therefore we need to count that this benefit, and it's accounted by sum in marginal rate of substitution, right? By this sum of marginal rate of substitution, as opposed, right, when we talked about private good, an additional unit only increases utility of one person, right? And therefore we had a optimality condition that marginal rate of substitution is equal to marginal rate of transformation. Right? You see the difference? I hope you do. Okay, we need to move. We talked about Pareto efficient provision of public good. Now we need to discuss what would the market provide. To do that, we will again assume that good X is private, good G is pure public good. We now need to specify prices, right? We talk about market. Price of each good is normalized to 1, and individuals assumed to be price takers. So each household starts with an endowment YI of good X. And what is critical now, how we would finance the provision of public good. We assume that each individual contributes little GI to public good funding. And then the amount of public good that is produced is equal to the sum of the total contributions. So capital G is equal to sum over I of little gi. And then consumption of private good is equal to the difference between endowment yi and the contribution to the public good gi. You see the difference? So it's important because here there is like there is no social planner who can kind of determine how much of good G produced. People need somehow to work together to produce public good. And yes, and so what they do, they contribute toward the public good funding some amount that we denote by little gi, and then whatever the money they collected, they buy the public good on those money. Okay, so
excuse me.
Yes.
Does that mean that public good is non-endless? So that we buy some public good and after a while it run out of it. We run out of it. Oh, no.
It's think about the situation that initially there is one period model, right? So kind of, but what is the amount of public good? It's not like there is you go to the store and buy the public good, right? So if you buy this public good, then everyone else can consume it. This is not one would do. What people can do is, like, if they want to build a road, all the neighbors who live in this neighborhood, they come together and say, like, okay, let's build the road. Let's contribute toward this. When they contribute, they build the road, but they say the quality or the length of the roads depends on the total contribution.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay, sorry, I kind of pushed the button, go to the wrong place. Okay, here we are. So what is the problem now? Each individual solve his problem. He maximizes his utility subject to his budget constraint, right? So this is when we say decentralized private provision. So each individual solve his own utility subject to his own budget constraint. What is his utility? It's again utilities that depend on xi and the amount of public good. And here I wrote it in this way to emphasize that it depends on the contribution of each people. Right, GI plus G2, G1 plus G2 plus and so on, Gn, right? This is the total amount of public good, and the consumption, the utility depends on the total amount of public good. Budget constraint depends on my contribution toward the public good. So to solve this individual problem, we will use the Nash equilibrium notion, so that each individual chooses his best response, taking as given all other people choices. This means that we maximize with respect to xi and gi. If you do that, right, one way you can plug in the budget constraint into the utility function and then take the derivative with respect to say xi, you will end up with the following first order condition. The derivative of ui with respect to x equal to the derivative of ui with respect to g. Right? And recall that the prices of all goods are set up to 1 in this problem, so which means that marginal rate of transformation equal to 1. And then equation 11 can be wrote as marginal rate of substitution equal to marginal rate of transformation. Right? But, right, there is no sum here. And we talked about public good. This means that sum-Yeltsin rule is not satisfied. And this means that market provision of public good is suboptimal. One more mental or thought exercise that we can do to see that decentralized provision of public good is suboptimal. What we can do is we can propose and permit Pareto improvement. Exactly. So let's ask each person to invest 1 over n more dollars into the public good. And then we will now calculate the individual's welfare. So the change in individual welfare is the following. So because he now donates 1 over n more dollars to the public good, he spends less on the private good. And as a result, his utility will marginally will decrease, and this marginal reduction is equal to minus u, the derivative of ui with respect to x, which is marginal utility, multiplied the reduction in the consumption of private good, which is 1 over n. Plus, his utility will increase because now he will consume more of the public good. This increase is equal to the marginal utility ui, the derivative of ui with respect to g, multiply the quantity of good g, but it equal to n multiply 1 over n, because each person invests more, and as a result, right, the public good, the quantity of public good increases on n 1 over n. Since we started from a market equilibrium point, right? That is described, as we just derived, by the condition where the derivative of ui with respect to x equal to the derivative of ui with respect to g. We use it and obtain that the change into the welfare is equal to the derivative of ui with respect to g, multiply the difference between 1 and 1 over n, which is positive. So we see now the change, right? So by this manipulation, by this kind of intervention, right, we can increase the welfare of each person, which shows that the market outcome is inefficient. Moreover, we can see from this that it's characterized by an under provision of public good G, right? So what we did, right, we kind of over the time now, so let me quickly sum up what we did. We derived the Samuelson rule for the optimal provision of the public good, and we also now have finished a derivation of the fact that market provision of the public good is suboptimal. What I does not have time to go over now is to discuss some government intervention to kind of fix this problem. There are various interventions that could be taken. One is very famous and called Lindahl equilibrium or Lindahl crisis. I presume you already heard about it at your microeconomics course. It's not perfect. It has its own problem, but we kind of have it here because it's quite famous, and it's I would say in some way very instructive and genius, right? So please read it through, and I'm not sure, I hope you would have time at the seminar to discuss it. Problems in your homework about this Lindahl crisis, they are optional, but so we will see, right, how it works at the seminar. But what I have to say also, you will have homework, right, till next Friday. Next week is a special week for you because of the president holidays, right? We will have next week, but you will have to work. I will have uploaded you a video of the second lecture, so I would not give you a live lecture, but you will have to cover the material by yourself, so you will have a video of the lecture, and you will have a solution of the seminar. So sorry about that, right? But this is what is it, right? So if you have any questions, so please write me an email. But this is all for today. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I have a question. It says on my schedule that we have another class at 4 today.
Yes, this is seminar.
Okay.
And this will be not with me, but with another person, so your seminarist.
Okay, and how much, it's the first time that I have economics, like how much maths is involved? Is it like in the beginning, or is it quite intense?
So I would say it's quite intense. So this is, therefore I was like mentioning the requirement, so the prerequisites for the course. So we will use every lecture the Lagrangian. We will use this optimizations problem. Also, we will talk about later on about some intermediate microeconomics tricks, I would say. So yes, so please consider that, right? So it's I have to be true with you about that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there are no more questions, then let's stop here. But remember, if there are any questions, so please write me an email. And yes, you will have a seminar today at 4 something, right? Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Goodbye.